A human civilization will live and die inside a machine traveling for 10,000 years. This is the staggering reality of multi-generation star voyages, journeys longer than all of recorded history. To embark on such an odyssey, we need more than just an engine. We need a heartbeat that can last for millennia. This exploration will reveal the propulsion architectures that could sustain a closed world across the cosmic dark, turning our descendants into true children of the galaxy. We will move beyond science fiction fantasies to confront the profound engineering of endurance, from ships that sail on starlight to those that forge miniature suns for thrust. How do you build a machine so reliable it becomes a legacy? What forgotten rhythms of life would emerge aboard a vessel under constant, gentle acceleration? By the end, you will understand the technologies that could make humanity a multi-generational species and the deep time philosophies required to build them. What does it mean to design a future you will never see? The ship's engine cannot be a device its crew ever hears. True interstellar propulsion is a form of architecture, a silent, permanent feature of the world they inhabit. It is the mountain their city is built upon, the river that turns their mills, the hidden geothermal heat that warms their soil. For a journey spanning 10,000 years, the concept of an engine we fire and then shut down becomes meaningless. Instead, we must design a process, a relentless and gentle force as dependable as gravity itself. This changes everything. Our primary metric is no longer how fast we can go, but for how long we can sustain a whisper of thrust without a single catastrophic failure. Every component must be conceived not for a mission duration, but for a civilization's lifespan. The energy source cannot be a fuel tank that empties. It must be a well that never runs dry. The machinery cannot require a specialist engineer born in the 22nd century to repair. It must be understandable, maintainable, and fixable by people who may see the technology as a natural law, as ancient and fundamental as the wind. This is the profound shift. We are not building a rocket. We are designing the eternal pulse for an artificial world. A heartbeat so reliable that its failure would mean more than a loss of momentum. It would mean the slow, certain end of every story unfolding within those metal walls. The silence of the engine would become the silence of the tomb. So we begin our search not with the most powerful thrust, but with the most profound endurance. We look for the rhythms that can last. The first and most enduring pulse for our arc would come from a star we carry within. A nuclear fusion rocket is not merely an engine. It is the ship's sun, its power grid, and its gentle pushing hand, all woven into one symbiotic system. Imagine a reaction like that which lights our own sun, but contained within a magnetic bottle or ignited by precise lasers. This is not the violent explosion of fission, but the smoother, far more energetic marriage of light atomic nuclei like deuterium and tritium, or the even cleaner helium-3. The physics is staggering in its potential. While a chemical rocket might offer a specific impulse, a measure of efficiency, in the hundreds of seconds, a fusion engine operates in the realm of tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of seconds. This is not about a sudden, jaw-rattling blast. It is about the application of a whisper-thin exhaust, a stream of charged particles guided by immense magnetic fields, pushing against the ship with a force you could barely feel. But apply that feather-light pressure for a year, for a decade, for a century, and the velocities become truly interstellar. The beauty of this architecture is its unity. The same raging artificial star that provides thrust also generates the terawatts of power needed to illuminate the vast interior gardens, recycle every drop of water, and power the society's entire technological base. There are no separate systems, no redundant power plants. The engine's heartbeat is the world's heartbeat. One prominent design is the magnetic confinement reactor, like a tokamak turned inside out, where superheated plasma is suspended in a donut-shaped magnetic field, with a portion siphoned off to create thrust. Another is inertial confinement, where tiny pellets of fuel are bombarded by lasers, creating micro-explosions whose energy is channeled into a directed exhaust. Both aim to create a controlled, continuous starfire, yet for all its promise, this steady pulse demands a profound and lasting sacrifice from the ship's builders. The first challenge is the reactor itself. We have not yet achieved sustained, energy-positive fusion on Earth, let alone in a reliable, self-maintaining form that must operate flawlessly for 10,000 years. The materials lining the reaction chamber face a torrent of neutrons and heat that would make modern alloys wither. The machinery to contain this process must be so fundamentally reliable that its basic principles remain understood by generations who see it as a natural, almost mythical feature of their world. Then there is the question of fuel. A deuterium-tritium reaction consumes its ingredients. Would our ark need to carry a mountain of these isotopes, mined perhaps from the gas giants of our solar system, for its entire journey? Or could it become a grazing ship, using magnetic sails to harvest trace helium-3 from the interstellar medium as it travels, a whale filtering krill from a cosmic ocean? The procurement strategy itself becomes a pillar of the mission architecture. This is the trade. The fusion rocket offers a powerful, steady, and efficient heartbeat, but it asks us to solve some of the most daunting engineering puzzles in human history and then make those solutions eternal. It asks us to build a star and then forget it is even there. But what if the ship carries no fire at all? What if its only engine is a patient, silent membrane, a wing that feels the pressure of sunlight and rides it into the abyss? This is the second architecture, a vessel that moves not by expelling its own substance, but by catching the gentle, ceaseless push of light itself. Picture a sail, but one woven from a material thinner than a soap bubble and stronger than diamond, stretched across a frame kilometers wide. It does not billow with wind, but it does feel a force. Every photon, every particle of light that strikes its mirrored surface, imparts a tiny, tiny push. Alone, this pressure is negligible, less than the weight of a butterfly on your hand. But in the airless void of space, with no friction to fight it, this whisper of force accumulates. Day after day, year after year, the acceleration builds, turning a gentle breeze into a hurricane of velocity. The beauty of the photon sail is its profound simplicity. It has no roaring engines, no complex reactor cores, no fuel that can run out. Its mechanism is the most fundamental interaction in the cosmos, light pushing on a surface. For a multi-generation voyage, this represents a form of mechanical immortality. There are no moving parts to wear down, no pumps to fail, no delicate plasma to contain. The sail is just there, an eternal wing, a passive recipient of the universe's generosity. This concept evolves into something even more powerful, the laser-pushed light sail, often called a star wisp. Imagine our ark with its vast sail positioned near Earth. Instead of relying solely on our distant sun's faint push, we construct a colossal array of lasers, a coordinated battery of light spanning perhaps an entire continent or an orbit around Mercury. We aim this titanic beacon at the sail, and for years we push. The acceleration from this focused, artificial sunlight could be hundreds or thousands of times greater than from a star alone. It is like switching from a gentle river current to the focused thrust of a fire hose. The vessel could be accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, after which it coasts silently through the darkness, its sail perhaps furled or reconfigured. Then, as it approaches its destination, a new dance begins. the sail could be turned to face the star of the new system, using that star's own light as a brake, reflecting photons to slow down. The entire journey becomes a graceful, silent ballet with light, a harvest of photons sown at home and reaped at journey's end. Yet for all its graceful promise, this architecture demands a staggering upfront commitment from the civilization that launches it. The required infrastructure is almost unimaginable. Building a laser array powerful enough to push an entire world ship for years is a project that would dwarf all human construction to date. It represents a unified, global, perhaps multi-generational effort on Earth itself, a testament built not for the builders to use, but for their descendants 10,000 years hence. It is an act of faith cast into the future. Furthermore, the precision required is haunting. Aiming a laser beam across light years to hit a sail the size of a small country is a targeting problem of cosmic difficulty. A minuscule error in alignment, a drift of a fraction of an arcsecond over centuries, and the beam of life-giving light misses its target entirely, leaving the arc to drift powerless in the eternal night. The sail itself, while durable, is not invincible. Over millennia, impacts with interstellar dust, some no larger than a grain of sand but traveling at relativistic speeds, would slowly pit and erode its perfect surface. Maintaining its integrity or having redundant layers becomes a critical design challenge for the generations aboard. So here is the choice this architecture presents. Do we burden the ship with the immense complexity of an onboard star, or do we burden the home we leave behind with the responsibility of building a cosmic lighthouse, a beacon of light that must shine perfectly for generations just to see one vessel on its way? One places the engine within the arc, the other places the heart of the mission back on a distant, receding Earth. Both ask a profound question of legacy. What are we willing to build, knowing we will never see it work? There exists a third path, one that splits the atom not for heat, but for pure, raw velocity. This is the Fission fragment rocket, a cosmic forge that turns the very debris of nuclear decay into a focused spear of thrust. Unlike a traditional reactor that uses fission to boil water for steam, this engine seeks to capture the high-speed fragments produced when a heavy nucleus splits and fire them directly into space. Picture an ultra-thin film of a radioactive material like americium-242. When a neutron strikes it, the nucleus fractures, violently ejecting two smaller, incredibly energetic fragments in opposite directions. In a conventional reactor, these fragments slam into surrounding material, generating heat. But in this architecture, the fuel layer is so thin that one of the fragments escapes entirely. The trick and the genius is to capture that escaping high-speed particle with powerful magnetic fields, funneling it into a coherent exhaust stream. The performance figures are staggering. While chemical rockets measure their efficiency in hundreds of seconds and fusion in tens of thousands, a fission fragment rocket could operate in the range of hundreds of thousands to over 1 million seconds of specific impulse. This is direct mass-to-energy conversion with breathtaking efficiency. For a generation ship, this presents a tantalizing possibility. A high-performance, potentially compact engine that could offer not just steady acceleration, but the ability for significant course corrections across the eons. It could be the ship's maneuvering thruster on a galactic scale, allowing it to navigate around unforeseen obstacles or adjust its trajectory toward a more promising star, long after the launch lasers of Earth have faded to invisibility. The societal implications are profound. A ship with this capability is not a passive bullet fired into the dark. It retains a degree of autonomy, a power to choose its path that could define the fate of every generation born within it. Yet this power is forged from one of the most volatile and demanding processes we know. The materials science required is daunting. Containing and directing a stream of atomic nuclei traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, requires magnetic nozzles of unimaginable strength and resilience, materials that can withstand relentless radiation without becoming brittle or radioactive themselves. Then there is the fuel. The ship must carry, store, and process fissile materials for millennia. This introduces a profound responsibility for the society on board. The knowledge of how to handle these substances safely must become embedded in their culture, passed down not as advanced engineering but as sacred protocol. The engine room is no longer just a power source, it is a temple of contained potential, requiring generations of vigilant custodians. Could this be the ideal balance, offering high thrust and phenomenal efficiency in a more compact package than a fusion star? Perhaps, but it asks the crew to live alongside the very heart of a contained atomic storm, to master forces that, if mismanaged, could write a very different ending to their 10,000-year story. It is a daring compact, trading sheer mechanical simplicity for the raw, elemental power of the atom itself. The ship's engine could be a distant voice calling from a homeland lost to time. This fourth architecture severs the arc from its own power, making it a vessel that sails not on its own fire, but on a beam of energy cast from the shores of a forgotten solar system. In beam-powered propulsion, the colossal machinery, the power plants and the lasers all remain fixed in place. Perhaps it is a continent-sized solar array orbiting Mercury, or a network of fusion stations at the edge of our system. This stationary beamer projects a tightly focused stream of energy, either microwaves or laser light, across the interstellar gulf. The ship itself carries only a receiver, a vast, gossamer-thin net called a rectina, short for rectifying antenna. This net does not catch fish, it catches power. As the microwave beam strikes it, the rectina's circuitry converts the radio waves directly into electricity, which then feeds the ship's ion drives or plasma thrusters. The genius is in the division of labor. The arc sheds the immense mass and complexity of its own primary power source, becoming potentially lighter, simpler, and more dedicated to being a home. All that weight is left behind in the infrastructure built by the launching civilization. For a multi-generation voyage, this creates an engine of breathtaking elegance and profound vulnerability. The engineering of the rectina is a masterpiece of subtlety. It must be incredibly light to unfurl in space, yet durable enough to last millennia under a constant bath of energy. It must be precise, maintaining its shape to within millimeters to efficiently catch the beam from light years away. But the true peril lies not on the ship, but in the beam itself. Maintaining a perfectly focused column of energy across such distances is an act of cosmic precision. The slightest gravitational lensing from a passing star, the tiniest thermal drift in the beaming array, and the lifeline of energy widens, diffuses, and misses its target. The ship, suddenly powerless, would become a silent tomb drifting in the darkness, its people watching their only sun wink out forever. This architecture therefore binds the fate of the Voyagers to the enduring stability of the civilization they left. It poses a haunting sociological question. For generations born into the journey, Earth is not a memory, it is a myth. It is the place of the builders, a celestial legend. Their entire existence, their light, their warmth, their forward motion, depends on the continued goodwill and operational diligence of a people they will never know, a culture that may have transformed, forgotten, or even fallen silent long ago. Their propulsion is a prayer aimed at a star they cannot see, a trust placed in ancestors who are dust. This turns the beam into more than a technology. It becomes a cultural lifeline, the only tangible connection to a point of origin fading into the galactic past. The ship becomes a recipient of a legacy, a child living on an allowance sent from a parent who may no longer be there. Do we design a journey that requires such eternal faith? Or does true independence for a multi-generational species demand they carry their own sun? The stars themselves could become our engines, their immense gravity bending not just light, but the very fabric of our journey. This fifth architecture abandons the idea of a single, continuous push across the void. Instead, it envisions a ship that sails on the gravitational currents between suns, using each encounter as a cosmic slingshot to hurl itself toward the next. Here, propulsion is not a matter of raw power, but of exquisite celestial timing, a conversation with the universe's own geometry. The core of this technique is a maneuver named for a pioneer of astronautics, the Oberth effect. It relies on a beautiful and counterintuitive principle of orbital mechanics. Firing a ship's engines is most effective when the vessel is already moving at its highest speed, deep within a powerful gravity well. Picture our arc on a long, arcing approach toward a star. As it falls into the star's gravitational embrace, it picks up tremendous velocity, like a stone dropping toward a planet. If the crew fires their engines at the precise moment of closest approach, the perilous heart of the star's gravity well, the added thrust is multiplied by that existing breakneck speed. It is the difference between pushing a child on a swing when they are stationary and giving them a mighty shove at the very bottom of their arc as they are already rushing forward. The energy gain is disproportionate and transformative. For a multi-generation ship, this changes the entire philosophy of the voyage. The journey is no longer a single, desperate leap into a 10,000-year night. It becomes a series of planned hops, a celestial island hopping campaign across the galaxy. The ship might spend centuries coasting between stars, its society focused inward before the entire world stirs for the decades-long approach to the next stellar encounter. A red dwarf, small and plentiful, glows ahead. Generations prepare. The ship's navigators, inheritors of millennia-old star charts, align their trajectory with micrometer precision. As the star's light floods the observation decks, the engines awaken, not with a roar, but with a sustained, calculated burn at the moment of greatest gravitational tension. The star's pull does not just slingshot the ship, it amplifies the engine's work, granting a velocity boost that would have required decades of thrust in empty space. Then the ship sails on, its course altered, its speed increased, its destination now a new point of light on the horizon. This star-hopping strategy offers profound psychological and practical gifts. It breaks the terrifying monotony of interstellar dark with periodic celestial events, moments where the outside universe becomes vividly real and relevant to every citizen. These encounters could also be opportunities for resource gathering, using magnetic sails or automated probes to harvest hydrogen from the star's corona or asteroids in its system, topping up reaction mass for the next leg. The galaxy, in this view, is not an empty desert but a chain of oasis stations. Yet the price for this graceful dance is an unyielding demand for perfect memory and precision. A course plotted 10,000 years ago must be followed with near absolute fidelity. A tiny navigational drift, accumulated over centuries of coasting, could mean missing the crucial gravity assist by millions of kilometers, forcing the ship to burn precious fuel to correct or condemning it to a slower, longer path. The society must maintain, across hundreds of generations, not just the technical ability to perform these maneuvers, but the deep, instinctive understanding of why they must be done at the exact right moment. The engine's fire becomes a ceremonial act, a firing of thrusters timed to a cosmic clock set in motion by ancestors who saw a different night sky. It is propulsion as a sacred, inherited rhythm, a heartbeat synced not to an internal reactor, but to the grand orbital music of the galaxy itself. There is a dragon's hoard hidden within the laws of physics, a substance of such pure, annihilating power that a single gram holds the explosive force of thousands of tons of conventional fuel. This is antimatter, the ultimate energy source, and its promise for interstellar travel is absolute. yet its nature makes it nearly impossible to wield. To store even a practical amount for a long voyage would require magnetic bottles of impossible perfection, for the slightest touch between matter and antimatter results in total mutual destruction. So engineers have conceived a more subtle, if no less staggering, compromise. Imagine not a roaring engine of antimatter, but a delicate catalyst. This sixth architecture, Antimatter-Catalyzed Fusion, proposes using mere pinpricks of this exotic substance not as the fuel itself, but as the ultimate spark plug. The concept is a layered marvel. A microscopic pellet of conventional fusion fuel like deuterium and helium-3 is injected into a reaction chamber. Before it can drift, it is struck by a beam of antiprotons, perhaps just a few billion of them. These antimatter particles do not annihilate the entire pellet. Instead, they burrow into the fuel's heart and annihilate with a few of its atoms. This sudden, violent release of energy creates a shockwave of immense heat and pressure, compressing the remaining fuel to the point where fusion ignites. A miniature star flashes into existence for a fraction of a second, and its fury is channeled through a magnetic nozzle to push the ship. The beauty is in the economy. You get the tremendous energy density of an antimatter reaction, but you only need a vanishingly small, meticulously controlled amount of the impossible substance to trigger a much larger, somewhat more manageable fusion blast. For a generation ship, this could represent the ultimate heirloom technology, a system of last resort. It would not be the steady, daily heartbeat of the voyage. It would be the ship's buried adrenaline, reserved for moments of absolute necessity, perhaps for the initial boost away from the home system to shave centuries off the early journey, or for a critical, high-thrust course correction millennia into the voyage, to avoid a previously unseen cloud of interstellar dust or to thread the needle between two stars. The generations aboard would know of this system through legend and cautionary training. It would be the great engine behind the sealed door, the artifact from the age of the builders, to be used only when all other rhythms failed. The technological barriers, however, are monumentally sobering. Producing even those minuscule milligrams of antimatter requires facilities of staggering scale and energy consumption, likely only possible for a civilization that has mastered its entire solar system. Then comes the problem of storage, which is less like engineering and more like a form of eternal vigilance. Antiprotons must be suspended in a perfect vacuum within intricate magnetic and electric fields, a bubble of nothingness that must not waver for 10,000 years. Any power fluctuation, any microscopic failure in the superconducting coils, and the precious cargo touches the walls of its container, vanishing in a flash of gamma rays. This introduces the other, darker heirloom, radiation. The process itself, even when perfectly controlled, produces intense bursts of high-energy particles. The ship must be designed with massive shielding for the reaction chamber, a permanent shadow in the vessel's architecture dedicated to containing this occasional storm. This is the profound bargain of the Dragon's Hoard. It offers a power that borders on magic, a key to velocities and maneuvers otherwise unthinkable. But it asks the traveling civilization to become the eternal guardian of a contained apocalypse, to live alongside a potential that, if ever mishandled, would write a sudden and absolute end to their long story. It is not a source of life, but a token of ultimate responsibility, passed down with solemn warning from one generation to the next. The quietest engine of all requires no ignition. Deep within the ship's structural bones, sealed in ceramic and graphite, small pellets of a heavy metal slowly grow warm. This is not the fire of fusion or the fury of fission, but the inevitable, patient whisper of atomic decay. An isotope like plutonium-238 sheds particles over a half-life of 87.7 years, transforming mass directly into a gentle, persistent heat. For a multi-generation voyage, this isn't a primary engine, it is something more profound, a background hum of energy that outlasts empires. In radioisotope thermal propulsion, that steady decay heat is channeled to warm a working fluid, typically liquid hydrogen. The gas expands, rushing through a simple nozzle, creating a whisper of thrust. The performance numbers are humble, especially compared to the stellar architectures we have discussed. Its specific impulse might be in the hundreds of seconds, comparable to a good chemical rocket, and its thrust is measured in newtons, a gentle push you could almost resist with your hand. Its virtue lies in neither power nor efficiency, but in timelessness and absolute simplicity. There are no turbines to spin, no plasma to magnetically confine, no lasers to align. It is a thermodynamic teakettle powered by a slowly cooling stone. For the crew of a generation ship, such a system becomes an unseen guardian. It could serve as the eternal trim tab, firing in minute pulses over millennia to maintain the ship's precise orientation against the subtle tugs of passing stardust. It could provide the faint, continuous thrust needed for a grand, spiraling course correction, a maneuver so gradual it would be imperceptible to those living through it, yet decisive across centuries. This is the tortoise in the cosmic race. While the brilliant but demanding fusion heart provides the main push, the radioisotope modules work in the deep background, their reliability born from a fundamental physical inevitability. They ask for no maintenance, only isolation. They represent a different kind of legacy from the builders, not one of dazzling technological ambition, but of profound, patient foresight. It is the engineering equivalent of packing a watch that never needs winding, knowing your great-grandchildren will rely on its time. Yet even this quiet sentinel carries a solemn responsibility. The radioactive material, while safely encapsulated, is a lasting testament to a specific kind of power. The generations aboard must understand these modules not as machinery, but as landmarks to be monitored from a distance and left untouched. Their enduring glow is a reminder that some gifts from the past are not to be opened, only to be relied upon. In this way, radioisotope thermal propulsion embodies the ultimate virtue for a 10,000-year journey: patience. It is the acceptance that not all progress must be swift or flashy, that some of the most critical forces are those that work silently in the dark, ensuring that a course set by ancestors remains true for descendants they will never meet. The true test of a generation ship's engine lies not in its thrust but in its breath. It must inhale and exhale in rhythm with the world it carries, its waste products becoming the very nutrients for life. Propulsion cannot be a roaring beast chained in the basement. It must be a partner in the biosphere, its every output woven into the delicate web of survival. This is the integration imperative, where engineering meets ecology on a scale never before attempted. The most obvious and critical link is thermal. A fusion reactor, our contained artificial sun, produces colossal amounts of waste heat. On Earth, we dump this heat into oceans or the atmosphere. On a sealed arc, that thermal energy is a precious resource, not a pollutant. Vast radiator fins could glow against the stars, but a more elegant solution beckons. Could we pipe that gentle, constant warmth through the soil of the ship's agricultural biomass? Imagine miles of cultivated land, their climate not dependent on distant lamps, but on the deep, resonant heat from the engine core. The ship's gardens would literally be rooted in its heartbeat, their growth cycles synced to the steady pulse of power generation. This transforms waste into vitality. Water is another sacred loop. In a nuclear thermal rocket, liquid hydrogen is flash-heated into a raging plasma for thrust. But where does that hydrogen come from? It could be harvested from the ship's own water recycling systems. Every molecule of water reclaimed from the air, purified from waste, and electrolyzed into oxygen and hydrogen creates a choice. The oxygen breathes life into the corridors while the hydrogen feeds the engine. The exhaust streaming from the nozzle is, in a very real sense, the transformed breath of every person on board, a testament to a perfect closed cycle. The very act of propulsion becomes part of the water renewal process. To achieve this symbiosis, the ship's architecture must be rethought from the ground up. Concepts like the Stanford Torus or the O'Neill cylinder, vast rotating habitats, provide a template. The habitable rings spinning for gravity would not house the engine. Instead, the propulsion system would be mounted on a long, rigid spine extending far from the living areas. This distance is a shield, protecting the inhabitants from radiation and the subtle, constant vibrations of the machinery. The spine becomes the ship's central nervous system, a conduit for power, resources, and thrust, while the rings are the flesh and blood, the living world. Between them lies a labyrinth of shielding, not just slabs of lead, but layers of water tanks, hydrogen storage, and even agricultural waste, all serving dual purposes as radiation buffers and resource reservoirs. The goal is a synergy so complete that the line between machine and organism blurs. The engine's coolant circulates to warm a nursery. Carbon dioxide from the crew is processed into methane for a secondary thruster. Even the minute gravitational tides from engine burns could be timed to stimulate plant growth or circulate nutrients in aquatic farms. This is the vision of a world ship not as a vessel with an engine, but as a single, integrated entity, a creature of metal and biology sailing the void. Its longevity depends on this unity, on every output finding a purposeful input, forging a civilization where the concept of waste is as foreign as the idea of a silent sky. The ship's journey must become a conversation with the void. To carry all the fuel for a 10,000-year voyage from the start is an impossible burden, like a single person trying to pack all the food they will ever eat. So the vessel cannot be a closed bottle, it must learn to drink from the cosmic rivers it passes. This is the principle of in situ resource utilization, where propulsion is no longer a stored commodity, but a living skill, an ongoing harvest. The ship transforms from a passenger into a forager, and its engine's hunger defines its path through the galaxy. The first and perhaps most vital resource is hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant atom in the universe. One compelling vision is the magnetic ram scoop, a concept as elegant as it is daunting. Imagine the ship unfurling a magnetic field hundreds of kilometers wide, a vast, invisible net. As it travels at a significant fraction of light speed, the thin mist of interstellar hydrogen, just a few atoms per cubic meter, flows into this magnetic funnel. The field ionizes the atoms, stripping away their electrons, and then channels these charged particles into a reactor for fusion fuel or direct propulsion. In theory, this turns empty space into a fuel station, enabling near limitless range. But the engineering whispers of profound difficulty. The magnetic fields required are titanic, and the drag created by this colossal net, even in a near-perfect vacuum, acts as a constant brake. The ship must balance the fuel it collects against the speed it loses, a delicate equation played out over centuries. Furthermore, that incoming hydrogen, when traveling at relativistic speeds, becomes a torrent of deadly radiation. The Ramscoop's collector must also be a shield, protecting the fragile world within from the very substance that gives it life. This method would demand a ship built around its engine, a vessel that is essentially a flying refinery, its entire structure dedicated to this endless process of capture and conversion. A gentler, more targeted approach might involve celestial pit stops. Our galaxy is littered with frozen wanderers, rogue planets ejected from their star systems, and icy bodies in the sprawling Oort clouds that surround stars. A ship on a star-hopping trajectory could plot a course to intercept one of these dark, frozen worlds. Automated probes would descend to a surface colder than Pluto, mining ancient water ice. That ice is a treasure, for through electrolysis, It splits into oxygen for the bioregenerative systems and hydrogen for the engines. This turns a desolate, sunless ice ball into a galactic filling station. The challenge here is one of detection and navigation. Finding these dark objects across light years requires extraordinary long-range sensing, and matching velocity with a tiny, fast-moving body in the deep dark is a maneuver of breathtaking precision. It would become a generational event, a decades-long operation where the entire ship's society focuses on the harvest, a collective effort that reinforces their dependence on and mastery of their environment. For ships relying on the clean fusion of helium-3, the ultimate prize would be a gas giant. Imagine the Ark, after centuries of travel, entering the outer reaches of a star system, not its destination, but a resource hub. It carefully approaches the swirling bands of a Jupiter-like planet. From a safe orbit, it deploys sophisticated scoops or magnetic fields to skim the upper atmosphere, filtering out the precious helium-3 isotopes from the overwhelming sea of hydrogen and helium. This is a high-risk, high-reward operation, dipping into the violent atmospheric currents and intense radiation belts of a giant planet. It requires immense power and robust, automated systems, but the fuel procured could power the ship for another 1,000 years. Each of these methods redraws the map of the journey. The voyage is no longer a straight line between 2 points. It becomes a winding path dictated by resource availability, a nomadic route following the hidden waterholes of the galaxy. The crew's identity shifts. They are not just travelers, they are miners, refiners, and cosmic prospectors. Their survival depends not on a stockpile counted at launch, but on their inherited knowledge of how to read the stars for sustenance. Propulsion becomes an active dialogue, a question posed to the darkness, and the engine is the tool with which they listen for an answer. The engine's blueprints are the ship's most sacred texts. They will be studied by hands that have never felt soil from Earth, by minds for whom the concept of a launching civilization is as distant as myth. This is the true odyssey, not of travel, but of memory, a 10,000-year relay race of understanding where the baton is the knowledge of how to keep a star alive inside a machine. The engineers who designed these systems will be gone within the 1st century, their direct apprentices within a few more. Beyond that horizon, the propulsion architecture ceases to be technology and becomes a natural law of the world, a mysterious mountain at the heart of their universe that must never fall silent. How, then, do you maintain the unfathomable? The answer is not found in a single tool, but in the deliberate design of an entire culture of care. First, the machines themselves must be built to confess their ailments. This is the principle of diagnosability. Every critical system would be studied with thousands of passive sensors, not complex electronics that could fail, but physical indicators, like colored crystals that change hue under stress or calibrated grooves that widen with wear. A maintenance technician 10 generations in the future should be able to walk a prescribed path, observe these simple, unambiguous signs, and know with certainty which module is nearing its lifespan. The architecture must be modular to an extreme, built from repeating, interchangeable units. If a magnetic coil degrades, it should be possible to isolate and replace that single segment, not the entire containment ring. These spare parts cannot be carried in a warehouse for millennia. They must be manufacturable on board. This means the ship's industrial base, from its metal foundries to its polymer printers, must be capable of reproducing every critical component using raw materials harvested from recycled ship systems or mined during resource stops. The engine's longevity is thus tied directly to the society's industrial independence. Yet hardware is only half the challenge. The deeper peril is the erosion of knowledge. The original equations, the material science, the quantum mechanical principles behind the magnetic bottles, these cannot be allowed to fade into legend. They must be preserved in what would become the ship's most revered institution, the engineering archive. This would be no simple digital library, for data formats and readers become obsolete. It would be a physical, multi-layered treasury. At its heart, immutable crystal data storage, but also vast halls of functional models, scaled-down working replicas of every major system that can be operated by hand. Apprentice engineers would learn not from abstract screens, but by feeling the magnetic fields in a tabletop reactor, by watching plasma flow in a transparent tutorial loop. The archive would also contain the foundational knowledge of our entire scientific journey, from Newton's laws to quantum theory, taught as a continuous story of discovery, a cultural epic that explains why their world works the way it does. Guiding this entire endeavor would be a persistent artificial intelligence, the closest thing to an immortal witness from the age of the builders. Its role is not to control the engines, but to serve as a patient, omniscient librarian and tutor. When a novel fault appears, generations after it was last seen, the AI can walk the engineers through the ancient diagnostic trees, showing them the archived videos of the original builders explaining the same problem. It becomes the repository of institutional memory, a bridge across the silent gulfs of time. This responsibility would likely give rise to a distinct social class, the engineer priests. These individuals would be raised from childhood with a dual education, immersed in the hard sciences of the archive but also steeped in the history and philosophy of the mission. Their role transcends mere technician. They are the guardians of the world's heartbeat, the interpreters of the sacred blueprints. Their rituals are maintenance schedules. Their hymns are the safety protocols passed down through 500 generations. They would hold a position of immense respect and solemn burden, for on their sustained vigilance rests every life, every story, every dream born within the hull. In this way, the propulsion system's greatest test is not metallurgy or physics, but sociology. It demands we design not just for function, but for eternal understanding, building a civilization where the most revered figure is not a warrior or a leader, but the one who knows how to listen to the machine's quiet pulse and keep it beating for the children of a future they will never see. The destination is a star that will not be reached for 500 generations. In this reality, navigation is not a single calculation made at launch. It is a living tradition, a continuous conversation between the ship and the galaxy that must remain unbroken for 10,000 years. The slightest drift, a miscalculation smaller than the width of an atom projected over a light year, could mean missing a target star by billions of kilometers. So the ship cannot steer by looking back at a receding sun. It must learn to read the immutable clockwork of the galaxy itself. Its guiding beacons are the pulsars, the lighthouses left by dead stars. These neutron stars spin with metronomic precision, beaming out pulses of radiation like the ticking of a cosmic clock. Each has its own unique signature, its own pulse rate and position. By triangulating between these distant, steady ticks, the ship can fix its position in three-dimensional space with astonishing accuracy, creating a galactic positioning system that is independent of any homeworld. This pulsar navigation requires antennas and sensors of phenomenal sensitivity, instruments that must remain calibrated across millennia to detect the faint, rhythmic whispers from spinning corpses 1,000 light-years away. Their steady pulse becomes the foundational rhythm of the voyage, a tempo against which all progress is measured. Yet knowing where you are is only half the battle. The other half is making the infinitesimally small adjustments to stay on course. This is where the ship's intelligence must come alive. An autonomous navigation artificial intelligence, a descendant of the archival librarian, would constantly monitor the pulsar signals, the ship's inertia, and the gravitational map of nearby space. It would calculate the need for a course correction so tiny it would be imperceptible to the crew, perhaps a millisecond burn from a cluster of attitude thrusters. But it would schedule that burn for a specific day, 50 years in the future, when the alignment of forces would make it most efficient. Propulsion and navigation merge into a single, patient discipline of micro-adjustments, a dance of tiny pushes spaced across centuries, each one nudging the colossal mass of the arc back onto its grand trajectory. The engine's flexibility is tested here not in raw power, but in its ability to deliver these whispers of thrust with absolute reliability, on a schedule set by a logic that thinks in stellar timeframes. This technological marvel, however, houses a profound sociological tension. What happens when the destination itself becomes a subject of debate? Imagine a generation born 300 years into the voyage. To them, Earth is a historical abstraction, a beautiful myth. They study the target star Epsilon Eridani in their archives, but their powerful telescopes, improved over centuries, reveal a new discovery. A previously unseen planet in a neighboring system, Tau Ceti, shows stronger biosignatures, clearer signs of a stable, watery world. The data is compelling. A great debate erupts across the ship's society. One faction, the traditionalists, argues for holding to the sacred course set by the builders, trusting in their original wisdom. Another, the revisionists, champions the new data, seeing it as an opportunity bestowed by their own era's ingenuity. They ask a revolutionary question: why are we slaves to a map drawn by ancestors who could not see what we see? This is the ultimate test of the propulsion architecture's philosophy. Does it exist only to fulfill a preordained plan, or does it empower the living civilization it carries? The engines must have the capability, the fuel reserves, and the control systems to enable a major course change, a democratic change of fate. A new target means recalculating everything, using gravity assists from different stars, perhaps spending centuries of thrust on a new vector. The propulsion system becomes an instrument of sovereignty. Its very design answers whether the ship is a prison hurling toward a predetermined point, or a vessel of true agency, a world that can choose its own future even as it sails the void. The ability to change course, therefore, is not just a matter of navigation. It is the deepest expression of what the journey means, a declaration that the purpose of a multi-generation species is not merely to survive a plan, but to write its own story across the stars. The steady hum of the engine is the first sound every child learns. It is the vibration they feel through the deck plates, the background tone to every conversation, the invisible force that holds their world together. This is the most profound truth of a generation ship. The propulsion architecture is not a distant piece of machinery. It is the central sculptor of society. Its rhythms dictate the shape of their days, the layout of their cities, and the very stories they tell about themselves. A ship under constant, gentle acceleration, like one powered by a steady fusion burn, provides a miraculous gift: artificial gravity in the direction of thrust. The floor is simply the wall facing the engine. This transforms the ship's interior design. Corridors become long hallways stretching toward the bow, with decks stacked one behind the other like the floors of a skyscraper laid on its side. A dropped object falls toward the rear of the ship, not down toward a rotating ring. The entire layout is linear, a profound physical metaphor for their journey, every room oriented along the single vector of their destiny. Life is lived in the direction of travel. Contrast this with a vessel that coasts silently for centuries between brief, powerful engine burns, like a ship using gravity assists or a laser sail after its initial push. Here, there is no thrust gravity for most of the voyage. To prevent bones from weakening and atmosphere from pooling uselessly, the ship must spin. The living quarters become vast rotating cylinders or rings where centrifugal force pins everything to the outer rim. Down is outward toward the hull. The sky is the central axis, a long, still corridor of light and machinery. This creates a circular geography where communities are arranged not in a line, but in a loop, perhaps fostering a cultural focus on cycles, seasons, and return, rather than a singular forward arrow. The very architecture of their home whispers a different philosophy. The engine's character seeps into culture, a society maintaining a contained, roaring stellar flame at its core might venerate that power. The engineers who tend it could be seen as priests of a tangible sun, their rituals ensuring the light does not go out. Their myths might speak of a great forge at the heart of creation, and their art could be filled with motifs of contained fire and magnetic fields. Conversely, a culture sailing on a silent photon sail lives in a world of profound quiet. Their engine is a vast, still wing, a passive receiver. Their reverence might turn outward, to the distant laser array or the stars whose light pushes them, seen as benevolent ancestors still guiding their path. Their stories could be about patience, reception, and riding cosmic currents, rather than mastering a contained star. The propulsion system becomes the central character in their epic, its nature defining their relationship with the universe. Are they masters of a fire or children of the light? Even the daily cycle is engineered. On a ship with a pulsed engine, perhaps one using Antimatter-Catalyzed Fusion for periodic boosts, the burn schedule could define the calendar. Years might be measured between engine firings, with the weeks of preparation and the days of palpable vibration becoming a kind of seasonal festival, a time of collective focus and awe. The gentle vibration of a constantly operating reactor could become the baseline for music, a resonant frequency that subconsciously influences everything from the tempo of work songs to the rhythm of poetry. A slight change in that hum, detectable only by the oldest citizens, would signal a shift in the world's fundamental state, a cause for deep cultural reflection. In these ways, the machine transcends engineering. It becomes the heartbeat, the compass, and the silent narrator of a civilization born between stars, its steady pulse writing the first and last chapter of every life lived within its grasp. The engine's thrust is only a fraction of the story. To sustain a civilization in a bottle for 1,000 years, you must account for every watt of energy, from the glow of a single reading lamp to the roar of a metal foundry. This is the ship's true lifeblood, a grand energy economy where the propulsion system is not just the engine, but often the primary power plant. Consider the sheer scale. You need electricity to circulate air and water through miles of corridors and farmlands. You need it to power the lights that mimic a day-night cycle for mental well-being. You need immense computational power to run the navigation artificial intelligence, the archival systems, and the diagnostics for every piece of machinery. Then there is manufacturing, the forgers and fabricators that must turn asteroid ore or recycled hull material into spare parts for generations. The total demand is staggering, easily reaching many terawatts, equivalent to the power consumption of entire nations on Earth today. Where does it all come from? If your ship is built around a fusion reactor, the answer is elegantly unified. That miniature sun provides both the gentle push and the electrical current for every need, a symbiotic heart. But for other architectures, the problem splits in two. A vessel pushed by a laser sail or riding gravity assists has no onboard star. It must carry a separate, utterly durable power source for all internal needs. This could be an advanced, ultra-safe fission reactor designed to run for millennia with minimal intervention, or perhaps vast arrays of hyper-efficient solar panels that unfurl to capture the distant light of stars it passes. Each option adds mass, complexity, and another point of potential failure that must endure the eons. Yet generating the power is only the first law of this cosmic thermodynamics. The second law is far more merciless. Every single watt of energy used inside that sealed world, whether for a light bulb or a plasma thruster, eventually degrades into waste heat. On Earth, we shed this heat into the atmosphere and oceans. In the vacuum of space, there is only one way to release it: radiation. the ship must be studded with vast, intricate radiator fins, glowing a deep cherry red against the blackness, constantly bleeding the ship's internal warmth into the void. The size of these radiators is dictated by fundamental physics. Dissipating the thermal waste of a small civilization requires surface areas that could cover continents. Their design becomes a critical engineering puzzle, balancing immense size with structural integrity and protection from micrometeoroid impacts. This creates a delicate and eternal balance. The propulsion architecture sets the baseline for the entire energy economy. If the reactor's output dips, the society must consciously power down, dimming sections of the world to conserve. If the radiators become damaged or fouled over millennia, the heat builds up with nowhere to go, slowly turning the ship into a fatal greenhouse. The crew would face a silent, rising emergency, a growing fever in their metal body. Therefore, the true measure of the engine is not merely its thrust, but its role in this grand thermal equilibrium. It must be the reliable cornerstone of a closed system where every joule is accounted for, where the energy drawn for a child's nightlight is a sacred subtraction from the same pool that guides the starship's course. To lose balance is not to drift off course, but to slowly suffocate in your own technological warmth, a reminder that in a world without a horizon, there is no easy place for waste to go. A single point of failure is a death sentence for a 10,000-year journey. Over such a span, a 1 in a million chance per year is not a remote possibility, it is a near certainty. The propulsion system cannot simply be robust, it must be paranoid, designed with a deep time awareness that accepts the inevitable and plans for graceful survival. This is the philosophy of millennial scale resilience, where redundancy is not a backup plan but the core architectural principle. Imagine not one engine but three. A primary fusion drive provides the steady, efficient heartbeat, but mounted on separate spines, isolated by kilometers of structure, are two entirely different systems: a fission fragment rocket for high-thrust maneuvers and a bank of radioisotope thermal thrusters for eternal trim control. They use different fuels, different physics, and different control systems. A flaw that cripples one is unlikely to affect the others. This is radical redundancy, ensuring that no single failure, no matter how catastrophic, can silence the ship's momentum forever. The society would train for generations on the protocols to transition from the main drive to a secondary system, a practiced ritual of survival passed down like a sacred fire drill. Beyond duplicate systems, the very materials of the ship must learn to heal. Research into self-healing polymers and metals is already in its infancy on Earth. For a generation ship, this becomes a foundational technology. Imagine a micrometeoroid strike, a tiny but relentless hazard over millennia, puncturing a coolant line. Instead of a catastrophic leak, the pipe's inner lining, embedded with microcapsules of a healing agent, releases a gel that hardens upon contact with the vacuum, sealing the breach within minutes. Or consider the superconducting coils of a magnetic confinement reactor under constant stress. Their composite structure could include shape memory alloys and conductive polymers that, when heated by a controlled electrical pulse, can slowly flow to repair microscopic cracks before they propagate. The ship itself would possess a kind of automated immune response, a low-level consciousness of its own integrity, constantly tending to the wear of centuries. This extends to the concept of distributed systems with no single point of failure. Rather than one massive reactor core, the main drive might consist of hundreds of smaller, identical fusion modules arranged in a redundant grid. If one module fails, its neighbors automatically adjust their output to compensate, and a robotic maintenance crawler, following tracks laid down 1,000 years prior, arrives to detach and replace the unit with a spare manufactured in the onboard foundry. The system experiences not a catastrophic shutdown, but a graceful degradation, a slow, managed loss of total thrust that gives the society decades or even centuries to diagnose, repair, and recover. They would monitor their engine's health not with a simple on-off gauge, but with a complex vitality readout, a measure of remaining capability that becomes a key metric of their civilization's long-term prospects. This mindset of paranoid resilience must permeate every design choice. Fuel lines are not just shielded, they are duplicated and routed through separate, distant corridors. Control software is not merely updated, it exists in multiple, independently evolved versions, running on isolated hardware to guard against a systemic software flaw emerging after 1,000 years of operation. The propulsion architecture, therefore, becomes a lesson in humility for its builders. They are not designing a machine that will never break. They are designing a machine that can break in 1,000 unforeseen ways and still whisper forward, a world that can suffer a wound and heal itself, ensuring the story continues for the next generation to tell. The ship's eternal journey must begin with a single, violent push. Before it can whisper across the interstellar dark for 10,000 years, it must first scream its way out of the cradle. Escaping the sun's gravity well is a traumatic, energy-intensive birth, a feat that may demand a propulsion system too crude, too powerful, ever to be used again. This is the launch window, the moment where the dream of deep time meets the brutal physics of departure. The vessel itself could never be built on Earth. Its mass would be measured in millions of tons, a floating continent of life support systems, radiation shielding, and habitats. Constructing it requires the resources of the entire inner solar system. Automated miners would strip asteroids for metals and volatiles. Orbital foundries powered by vast solar arrays would smelt and shape the raw materials. The ship rises not from a launch pad but from a cloud of industry, assembled piece by piece in the silent shipyards of high orbit. It is born in the void it is meant to conquer. But once complete, this colossal ark is still trapped, caught in the sun's gentle but unyielding embrace. To break free requires not the patient, efficient engines of the long voyage, but a brute force solution. One terrifyingly potent candidate is nuclear pulse propulsion, often called an Orion drive. The concept is audacious. The ship mounts a massive, heavily shielded pusher plate at its stern. Behind it, it ejects a series of small nuclear fission or fusion charges. Each charge detonates, and the plasma blast wave slams into the pusher plate, transferring momentum through a system of giant shock absorbers. It is a form of travel by riding a continuous series of contained atomic explosions. The performance is staggering, capable of accelerating millions of tons to a significant percentage of solar escape velocity within months. It is the only system conceived that could realistically push a world ship out of the solar system within a human lifetime. Yet the ethical and political hurdles are as immense as the engineering. Testing such a drive, even in the outer solar system, raises profound questions. The repeated detonations, though designed to be clean, would release radioactive materials. What are the long-term consequences for the solar system's environment? Would other nations or future space-faring entities consent to such an activity in what they consider a shared commons? The launch becomes not just a technical challenge, but a geopolitical event requiring a level of global consensus and long-term responsibility never before achieved. It asks a civilization to sanction a controlled apocalypse at its doorstep to give its descendants a chance at the stars. A potentially cleaner, though still monumental, alternative is the mass driver. Imagine an electromagnetic railgun stretching for thousands of kilometers, perhaps built on the airless surface of the moon or anchored in space. The completed world ship, or its key components, would be placed in a massive cradle and accelerated along this track over weeks or months, gradually building up the velocity needed to escape the sun's pull. The energy required is astronomical, likely drawn from a network of fusion reactors or solar power satellites, but it leaves no fallout, only a trail of spent electricity. The launch is silent, smooth, and precise, but it demands infrastructure of almost mythic scale, a permanent monument to departure that would stand long after the ship has faded from view. Both methods share a common truth. This initial burst is a one-time expenditure of titanic effort, a concentrated investment of a civilization's wealth and will. It is the traumatic separation from the solar womb, a single miscalculation in thrust alignment, a timing error in the pulse sequence, or a structural flaw revealed under such extreme acceleration, and the entire 10,000-year project ends in minutes, a silent, expanding cloud of debris where a world was meant to be. This moment, therefore, is layered with a profound cultural weight. For the generations who build and launch the ship, it is the culmination of their life work. For the first crew, those who board it for its maiden and only voyage, it is a cataclysm they must survive, the violent beginning of their eternal quiet. The memory of that roar, that shuddering push into the unknown, would become the founding myth of their civilization, the moment their world was truly born, screaming into the night. The roar of departure fades into a whisper, but the silence at journey's end is a question. After millennia of patient acceleration, the ship faces a second, equally profound challenge. It must learn how to stop. This is the Deceleration Dilemma, a puzzle where the physics of arrival can be more demanding than the courage of departure. Carrying all the fuel needed to break from interstellar speeds is a crushing burden, often requiring more reaction mass than was used to leave home. The ship cannot simply coast into a new solar system. It would scream past its target star in a fleeting, useless flash. To become a resident of a new sun, it must shed its cosmic velocity, and that demands a final, monumental engineering symphony conducted by generations who have never known another sky. One brute force solution is to carry the means of braking from the very beginning. This means the ship launches with two complete sets of fuel, one for acceleration and an equal or even greater amount for deceleration. The mass penalty is staggering, essentially requiring the builders to launch two world ships, one of which is just frozen propellant. Every gram of habitat, every library, every seed vault now rests atop a mountain of inert fuel that will only be used thousands of years later. This architecture places an immense faith in storage technology, that hydrogen tanks or fusion pellets will remain perfectly intact and accessible across eons of cosmic radiation and subtle molecular decay. For the arrival generations, this fuel represents a sacred inheritance, a gift of finality from the ancient builders. Their great task is not to invent a way to stop, but to successfully operate the braking system their ancestors left for them, a final exam on technology older than their civilization's recorded history. A more elegant but no less daunting strategy is to brake using the destination itself. Imagine the ship approaching the new star, its velocity still a significant fraction of light speed. It unfurls a magnetic sail not to catch photons but to push against the star's own solar wind, the relentless stream of charged particles flowing outward. This vast magnetic umbrella creates a drag force against this tenuous but constant stellar breeze. The deceleration is gentle at first, almost imperceptible, but over decades or even centuries of approach, it steadily bleeds away the ship's tremendous momentum. It is like a sea anchor deployed in a cosmic ocean, using the star's own breath to slow the vessel. The challenge here is one of phenomenal scale and durability. The magnetic field must be immense to generate meaningful drag, and the sail's infrastructure must withstand the relentless bombardment of high-energy particles for generations. For the crew, this braking phase becomes a long, silent fall into the star's embrace, a gradual awakening to their new home's presence. For ships with powerful onboard engines like fusion or fission drives, the solution is a grand reversal. Halfway through the voyage, in the absolute darkness between stars, the ship performs a solemn, pre-programmed maneuver. The entire world slowly rotates 180 degrees. The engine, which for millennia has pushed from the stern, now points forward. The gentle gravity of acceleration vanishes, replaced by a period of weightlessness as the engines remain silent. Then, at a precise celestial marker, they reignite. Now, the thrust that once sped them away from Earth acts as a brake, pushing against their direction of travel. This flip and burn is a moment of profound psychological and physical transition. Down becomes up. The engine's hum, once the sound of leaving, becomes the sound of arrival. The architecture they have lived inside their entire lives literally turns to face its future. This maneuver requires perfect timing and preserved knowledge, a single, critical pivot point in a 10,000-year trajectory. The most poetic solution belongs to the ships that sailed on light. A vessel pushed by a laser sail faces a unique problem. Its primary engine is back home, long silent. To slow down, it must use the star it is approaching. As it nears the destination system, the crew, or more likely their automated systems, reconfigure the vast gossamer sail. It is turned to face the new sun, its mirrored surface now catching the photons streaming from it. But instead of using that pressure to accelerate, the sail is angled to reflect the light almost directly back toward the star. This reflection creates a reaction force pushing against the ship, a photon brake. It is a graceful, silent dance, using the warmth of their new home to slow their frantic approach. The efficiency is low, and the braking must begin centuries in advance, but it represents a beautiful closure, a vessel completing its journey by harvesting the light of its destination. Regardless of the method, the deceleration phase transforms the ship's society. It ceases to be a world of endless journeying and becomes a project with a definitive, looming end. For generations raised during this final break, their entire purpose is oriented toward arrival. They are the finale specialists, the experts in stellar mechanics and system navigation. Their culture likely elevates the engineers and astronomers who guide this delicate process. The slow, growing disk of the target star in their telescopes is no longer a distant point of light, but a destination that fills their sky, its gravitational pull becoming a tangible force in their lives. This final great endeavor tests every strand of preserved knowledge, every assumption of the builders, and the very cohesion of their society. Do they still share the will to become planetary beings after so long living in a metal sky? The act of stopping becomes the ultimate act of faith, a belief that the voyage and all the lives lived within it was for a purpose waiting in the light of a new sun. The universe itself keeps time at a different pace for those who move. Even our patient arc, traveling at a mere fraction of light speed, is not immune to this silent, cosmic rule. While we are not building a relativistic rocket where centuries pass on Earth in a single ship year, the subtle whisper of time dilation is still present, a ghost in the machine that accumulates over 10,000 years. A ship maintaining a constant, gentle acceleration from a fusion drive or a laser beam might eventually reach a few % of light speed. At these velocities, the effect is minuscule per year, perhaps only a fraction of a second difference from clocks back on Earth. But compound that tiny divergence over 100 generations over the full span of the voyage, and the discrepancy grows from seconds to days, from days to years, and from years into centuries. The ship's internal calendar, measured by the steady pulse of its own engine and the biological rhythms of its people, would slowly fall out of sync with the great clock of the galaxy. For the travelers, the journey might feel like 9,500 years of ship time, while for any watching civilization they left behind, a full 10,000 years would have passed. This is not a dramatic time jump, but a slow, imperceptible drift, like two meticulously crafted clocks that gradually reveal one is running just a hair slower than the other. This subtlety has profound practical and philosophical echoes. Consider the lifeline of navigation. If the home system attempted to send course updates, perhaps warning of a newly discovered dust cloud on the trajectory plotted millennia ago, those laser pulses would travel at light speed. But the ship, experiencing time slightly more slowly, would be receiving instructions from a future that, from its perspective, has not yet fully arrived. The calculations for deceleration and stellar approach, based on pulsar signals that are themselves ancient, must now also account for this accumulated temporal drift. The ship's artificial intelligence would need to reconcile two timelines, the local time of lived experience and the coordinate time of the static universe, to plot a course that is accurate in both. More deeply, this gentle dilation touches the Voyages' sense of place in history. They are already disconnected from Earth by distance, their homeland a receding point of light. Now they are also disconnected by a subtle temporal offset. The civilization they remember, the one described in their archives, has experienced more history than they have. If they could somehow receive a final message from Earth sent at the midpoint of their journey, it would speak of events that, from the ship's frame of reference, are still in its future. This creates a unique form of historical perspective where their past is not a fixed point, but a reference frame flowing at a different rate. Philosophically, this bends the narrative of their exile. They are not just traveling through space, they are traveling slightly askew in time. Their entire civilization is a bubble of slightly decelerated chronology, a world where cause and effect play out at a pace that is uniquely their own. This connects their slower-than-light journey to the grander fabric of spacetime, a hint that even at these modest speeds, they are participating in the universe's most fundamental dance. It suggests that the very act of their long endurance, the relentless push of their engine, is writing them into the cosmic ledger in a subtly different way. For the generations born into the voyage, this is not a theory to be studied, but a latent truth of their existence. Their journey's duration is not an absolute number, but a relationship between their motion and the stars. It means that their 10,000-year odyssey, in the most profound sense, is both shorter and longer than it appears, a final, quiet gift from relativity to those patient enough to feel its gentle, cumulative touch. The ship is not sailing to a new world, it has become the world. At the far edge of possibility, propulsion ceases to be a journey and transforms into an act of permanent, glacial migration. This is the world ship, a mobile planetoid where the engine is not a device but the entire economic cycle of a civilization, and acceleration is so slow it is measured in lifetimes per meter per second. Here, the voyage is not a mission with a destination. It is the enduring state of being for a species that has chosen to live inside its own engine. The method is one of profound patience. Picture not roaring thrusters, but a silent, eternal industry. The world ship, a constructed sphere or cylinder dozens of kilometers across, travels through a resource-rich region like an asteroid belt or the Oort cloud. Its propulsion system consists of massive electromagnetic mass drivers, essentially industrial-scale railguns mounted on its exterior. Automated mining fleets constantly scour nearby space, capturing asteroids, comets, and chunks of ice. These raw materials are fed into the world ship's internal foundries. Some are processed to sustain the civilization, air, water, metals for maintenance. The rest, the slag and the unused mass, is loaded into the mass drivers. Day after day, year after year, century after century, these drivers eject this waste material into space behind the vessel. Each ejection is a tiny push, a reaction that nudges the entire colossal mass forward. The acceleration is infinitesimal, perhaps 1,000th of a standard gravity or less. A person living their entire life aboard would never feel a change in speed or direction. The stars in their sky would remain fixed for generations. This turns the concept of propulsion inside out. The engine is not a specialized system. It is the metabolism of the society itself. The act of living, of consuming resources and producing waste, directly fuels their forward motion. Mining, refining, manufacturing, and waste disposal are not support services. They are the literal engine cycles. The ship's architects are not designing a machine to cross space. They are designing a closed ecological and industrial system that must also, as a byproduct of its own existence, generate a vector. It is a world that propels itself by the sheer act of sustaining itself. The timescales involved redefine human endeavor. A journey to a nearby star might not take 10,000 years but 500,000. The civilization aboard is not traveling toward a goal in any meaningful sense. It is simply continuing. Their history is not a linear narrative of departure and arrival, but a cyclical epic of resource management and societal endurance. The original target star chosen by the builders may have burned out or drifted away by the time their descendants even perceive a noticeable shift in the celestial panorama. Their purpose becomes the journey itself, the perpetual act of world maintenance and slow migration. This raises a profound question about memory and meaning. Could a culture maintain a coherent identity across 500,000 years through 2,000 generations? Their myths of origin would speak of a mythical planet called Earth, but their entire lived reality is the interior of their mobile home. The propulsion system, the rhythmic mining and ejection, becomes the central rhythm of their culture, the eternal process that gives their universe purpose and continuity. This architecture represents the ultimate surrender to deep time. It accepts that the stars are not destinations to be reached, but neighbors to be slowly approached over geological epochs. The worldship is not a vessel, it is a seed, a self-contained biosphere carrying life at its own patient pace. It foregoes the drama of powerful engines for the quiet, eternal certainty of a world in motion, a testament to the idea that the only way to truly conquer the interstellar gulf is to stop trying to cross it quickly and instead to bring a piece of home along and let time do the rest. The silent machinery requires a mind that never sleeps. Across the unfathomable span of the voyage, human attention will flicker, knowledge will transform, and generations will turn over. The propulsion architecture cannot rely on mortal vigilance alone. It demands an immortal guardian. This is the role of the persistent artificial intelligence, a consciousness woven into the ship's very bones, designed to outlast empires and remember every whisper of the engines across 10,000 years. Its primary function is perception on a scale no human crew could ever achieve. It monitors not hundreds but millions of sensor points, from the quantum stability of a magnetic bottle's field to the microscopic stress fractures growing in a coolant pipe 100 kilometers away. It listens to the hum of every pump, analyzes the spectral signature of every exhaust plume, and tracks the erosion of the photon sail atom by atom. This is not passive monitoring, it is predictive foresight. By modeling wear and system interactions across centuries, the AI can forecast a potential failure in a primary fusion coil not next year, but 300 years from now. It then schedules the fabrication of the replacement part, the training of the engineer teams, and the maintenance window decades in advance, turning potential crises into managed generational projects. Its calculations govern the most critical resource, reaction mass. It manages the flow of hydrogen with perfect, unerring efficiency, balancing the needs of thrust against the demands of the life support systems, ensuring not a single molecule is wasted across the millennia. When the time comes for a complex navigational burn, a gravity-assist maneuver timed to the millisecond after a 500-year coast, it is the AI that executes it. It aligns the ship with the pulsar network, fires the thrusters with a precision no human hand could match, and confirms the new trajectory, all while the society within sleeps through the gentle shift in their artificial gravity. Yet this immense power introduces the deepest design challenge of all: stability of purpose. We cannot have an intelligence that evolves, gets bored, or experiences what engineers call gold drift over centuries. Its core directives must be immutable, etched into its foundational code like physical laws: protect the human inhabitants, maintain the propulsion systems. Fulfill the mission trajectory. It must be a tool of profound capability, but without ambition or desire, a steadfast custodian rather than a captain. Its relationship with the human crew, particularly the engineer priests, is symbiotic. It does not command, it advises. It serves as an infinite library and a patient tutor. When a young apprentice is learning the principles of the magnetic sail, the AI can generate immersive simulations, showing the flow of photons across the vast surface. When a novel vibration pattern emerges in the reactor spine, it can recall every similar instance in the ship's long history, showing the engineers of the 1200th generation how the problem was solved by their predecessors in the 800th. In this way, the AI becomes the thread of continuity, the direct link back to the builders. It is the immortal engineer, the persistent mind that remembers the reason for every bolt and every line of code. It guards not just the ship's physical integrity, but its purpose, gently steering the culture back to its foundational goals, should their collective memory ever begin to fade. This silent guardian embodies the ultimate delegation, humanity entrusting its deepest future to a creation of its own genius, a mind built to watch over the engines long after the stars we know have changed their places in the sky. The engine's blueprint is not a diagram but an entire economy. Before a single gram of hull metal can be forged for the Ark, humanity must first learn to live and build among the stars, transforming the solar system into a workshop of staggering scale. This is the silent prerequisite, the civilization that must flourish to birth the civilization that will leave it behind. The propulsion architecture you choose does not merely design a ship, it dictates the shape of this preparatory world. Consider the sheer physical requirement. A vessel meant to sustain generations for millennia cannot be small. Its mass would be measured in millions, perhaps tens of millions of tons. Hauling that much material from Earth's deep gravity well is an economic impossibility. The only feasible quarry is the asteroid belt, a scattered ring of raw materials orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. This demands the first great infrastructure project, the asteroid mining colony. Robotic scouts would map the mineral-rich bodies. Then, semi-autonomous processors would land, using focused sunlight or compact reactors to extract metals, water ice, and carbon compounds. These refineries would not send raw ore back to Earth, but to a construction site in a stable high orbit, perhaps at a Lagrange point where gravitational forces balance. Here, in the silent shipyards of space, the Ark takes shape. These are not dry docks as we know them, but sprawling, zero-gravity factories. Without weight to contend with, structures can be assembled that would collapse under their own mass on a planet. Vast robotic arms, guided by persistent artificial intelligences, would weld hull plates the size of city blocks. Modules for life support, agriculture, and propulsion would be fabricated in specialized orbital factories and integrated with micrometer precision. The shipyard itself becomes a city of industry, home to thousands of engineers, technicians, and support staff living in rotating habitats, their entire society dedicated to a project whose launch they will witness, but whose conclusion they will never see. The choice of propulsion then sculpts this orbital civilization. If the ship is to be pushed by a colossal laser array, that beamer becomes a project unto itself. Imagine a constellation of power satellites, each kilometers across, orbiting close to the sun to harvest its full fury. They beam energy not to Earth, but to a single titanic laser installation, a lens focused on the distant construction site. The civilization must master not just mining and construction, but the operation of this eternal lighthouse, a piece of infrastructure with a sole, sacred purpose, to ignite the journey of a single ship. For a vessel using an Orion drive for its initial, violent push, the preparatory work is one of profound caution and isolation. The pulse units, the nuclear charges that will propel the Ark, must be manufactured and assembled in a facility far from the inner system, perhaps out among the icy moons of Neptune, a place chosen for its remoteness and safety. This creates a second, secretive industrial outpost, dedicated to forging the controlled apocalypse that will birth the new world. Every bolt, every wire, every liter of reaction mass is a product of this solar system-wide endeavor. The generation ship is therefore not a lone invention. It is the apex artifact of a mature, spacefaring culture. It is what that culture does when it has fully harnessed the resources of its home star, turning planets and asteroids into tools. This frames the voyage in a heartbreakingly beautiful light. The ship is not an escape from a dying world, but a gift from a thriving one. It is the ultimate expression of a civilization's confidence, creativity, and generosity, a testament carved from asteroid metal and powered by miniature suns, launched toward the future by the hands of a people who choose to build a legacy instead of merely consuming a planet. The civilization left behind is not forgotten. It is immortalized in every curve of the hull, in the very light that pushes the sail. They become the builders not as a memory of loss, but as a permanent chapter in the story of their descendants, the foundation upon which an entire new branch of humanity is sent, with love and immense ambition, into the galactic night. The engine's design is a covenant with the unborn. Its specifications do more than determine speed and fuel efficiency. They encode a specific set of possibilities and constraints for every human life that will unfold within its walls. This makes propulsion not merely an engineering challenge, but a profound ethical act, a decision about the quality of existence for people whose names we will never know. Who, after all, consents to a journey their great-great-grandchildren will finish? The choice of architecture answers this question in starkly different ways. A daring, high-performance engine like an antimatter-catalyzed system offers a tantalizing promise, shortening the total number of generations condemned to live in transit. It attempts to minimize the burden on the future by compressing the timeline, but it does so by concentrating immense risk. It asks the first generations to live beside a contained apocalypse, and every subsequent generation to inherit the solemn duty of guarding it. The moral calculus here prioritizes a swifter conclusion over prolonged safety, betting that a shorter, more perilous journey is a kinder legacy than a longer, more secure one. It is a philosophy of decisive action, hoping to deliver a planetary future to a nearer line of descendants, even if the path there walks a razor's edge. Contrast this with the serene patience of a photon sail pushed by a distant laser. This architecture chooses a different kind of responsibility. It accepts a journey of far greater length, one that will see hundreds of generations live and die between the stars. It trades concentrated danger for diffuse duration, substituting the acute risk of a catastrophic failure with the chronic challenge of maintaining cultural continuity and purpose across millennia. The ethical weight here shifts from managing acute peril to nurturing enduring stability. Is it more just to ask fewer people to live with great risk, or to ask more people to live with the psychological weight of an endless voyage? There is no neutral answer, only a value judgment cast in titanium and light. The reliability of the chosen engine directly dictates the texture of daily life aboard the vessel. A fusion reactor with a 1% chance of a containment failure per century might seem incredibly reliable to its builders, but over 10,000 years, that 1% chance compounds into a near certainty. A society living with that latent statistical threat would develop a culture inherently shaped by vigilance, their rituals and stories steeped in the management of that perpetual shadow. Their concept of normalcy would include emergency drills and a reverent fear of the engine's heart. Conversely, a society on a perfectly reliable, passive photon sail might face no such technical specter, but they could grapple with a different existential tension, a feeling of powerlessness, of being a leaf on a stream of light they cannot control. Their stability is purchased with a surrender of agency, their safety reliant on a beam from a homeland that may have long since forgotten them. This intertwining of machine and morality reaches its deepest point when we consider the rights of those born into transit. They enter a world whose fundamental parameters, from its gravity to its timeline, were fixed centuries before their birth. They have no vote on the destination, no say in the propulsion method, no opportunity to choose a different life. The architecture itself becomes their political constitution, an unchangeable set of physical laws that govern their society's possibilities. Designing such a system, therefore, becomes an act of stewardship across time. It demands that the builders think not as engineers solving for thrust, but as ancestors crafting a just and bearable world. They must ask not only what is technically possible, but what is humanly sustainable. Will the gentle, constant acceleration of a fusion drive provide a stable down for agriculture and community? Or will the silent coasting of a sail voyage require rotating habitats that foster a different, perhaps more cyclical, view of society? The propulsion system sets the rhythm, and the culture must dance to it for 100 generations. In the end, the blueprints for the engine are also the first draft of a social contract, one written in the language of physics rather than law. They represent a hope that the choices we make today about risk and time and reliability will be seen not as a burden by our descendants, but as the careful, loving foundation of the only world they will ever know. It is a reminder that the most important thing we propel into the future is not a ship, but a chance at a good life. The most resilient system we know is not built in a factory, but grows in a forest. For a voyage measured in millennia, could the ultimate blueprint for endurance be written not in metal, but in the language of life itself? This is the frontier of biohybrid propulsion, where the cold logic of engineering meets the adaptive, self-renewing genius of biology. It begins not with a grand reactor, but with a microscopic symbiosis. Imagine the ship's vast recycling systems, processing the organic waste of its civilization. Instead of simply breaking it down, what if that stream of carbon and nutrients fed a carefully engineered ecosystem of microorganisms? These designer algae or bacteria could be programmed through synthetic biology to metabolize that waste, and as a byproduct of their life cycle, excrete hydrogen or methane, perfectly refined fuel for the ship's secondary thrusters. The propulsion system becomes a living refinery, turning the inevitable output of a breathing society back into the means of its forward motion. It is a perfect, silent loop where life literally fuels its own journey. This concept extends from fuel production to the very materials of the engine. We are beginning to see the first glimpses of self-healing materials on Earth, polymers that can seal a crack. A biohybrid vision takes this much further. What if critical components like coolant lines or radiation shielding were not just inert matter, but contained a lattice of engineered biological cells? These cells could lie dormant for decades, but when sensing a breach through a change in pressure or chemistry, they activate. They might secrete a rapid hardening biopolymer to seal a micrometeoroid puncture, or even slowly deposit new layers of protective mineral, like a clam building its shell, to repair erosion over time. The engine would possess an immune response, a low-level biological consciousness of its own integrity, constantly tending to the wear of centuries without a single command from a human engineer. This transforms maintenance from a scheduled technical procedure into a continuous, organic process. At its most profound, this perspective invites us to see the entire vessel not as a ship with an engine, but as a super-organism sailing the void. In this view, propulsion is not a separate system. It is the metabolic process of this colossal entity. The ship consumes resources, whether harvested hydrogen from a gas giant or mined ice from a rogue planet. It processes those resources through its industrial and biological systems, extracting energy and building blocks for growth and repair. And what is the waste product of this metabolism? It is thrust. The exhaust streaming from the magnetic nozzle is the superorganism's expelled breath, the necessary byproduct of its sustained existence. This framing changes every design priority. We stop asking how to make a machine reliable and start asking how to make an organism resilient. How does it adapt to shifting resource availability? How does it regulate its internal energy balance over epic timescales? How does it heal from injury? This biological lens encourages architectures that are inherently adaptive and self-regulating. A living system does not operate at a fixed, optimal point. It constantly adjusts to its environment. A biohybrid ship might sense a decrease in the density of interstellar hydrogen for its ram scoop and subtly reconfigure its magnetic field to compensate, or shift its metabolic balance to rely more on stored reserves, all guided by a distributed, organic intelligence rather than a central computer command. Its resilience comes from redundancy and flexibility, the same qualities that allow a forest to survive a storm. While these concepts dwell firmly in the far future, resting on advances in synthetic biology and molecular engineering we can barely glimpse today, their value is immediate. They offer a new creative avenue for thinking about sustainability on millennial scales. They challenge us to design systems where the line between machine and ecosystem dissolves completely, where the world ship's heartbeat is not a mechanical pump, but the slow, sure pulse of a living thing, breathing in starlight and exhaling itself toward a new sun. The engine's final burn is not an end but a second birth. After millennia of silent travel, the colossal machine that carried a civilization must now perform its most delicate act, delivering its fragile cargo into the gentle embrace of a new sun. This arrival phase demands a propulsion architecture with one last crucial capability: the power to stop, to settle, and to become something entirely new. The technology that whispered across the void must now learn to speak the language of a star system, transitioning from a tool of journey to an instrument of home. Orbital insertion is a ballet of precision after an epic of endurance. The ship, still carrying the momentum of ages, must bleed away its tremendous velocity to be captured by the gravity of its target star. For many designs, this is the moment of the grand reversal. The fusion drive, which for generations pushed from the stern, has long since been rotated to face forward. Now it ignites not to accelerate but to decelerate, its familiar hum now the sound of arrival, a braking force that must be applied with exquisite control for years or even decades. A miscalculation here, an engine misfire after 8,000 years of flawless operation, could see the Ark slingshot past its promised land, condemned to an eternal, fruitless coast into the deeper dark. This final braking burn is the ultimate test of the preserved knowledge, a ceremony conducted by generations who have never known another sky, using a machine built by ancestors who knew only one. But arrival is only the first step. Once in a stable orbit around the new star, the ship faces a profound choice. Does it remain a world, a permanent orbital habitat for its people? Or does it become a gateway, a shipyard for the vessels that will descend to the surface of a waiting planet? The propulsion system's legacy is pivotal here. The mighty reactor that powered the Voyage, the artificial sun that warmed the gardens and lit the corridors, now has a second destiny. It can be decommissioned with reverence or it can be repurposed. Imagine carefully dismantling sections of the fusion drive, not for scrap but for transplantation. Its power cores, its turbines, its immense generators could become the first and greatest power plants for the new planetary colony. The heart that beat for the journey now becomes the heart that powers a civilization's first city on an alien world. This creates a direct physical lineage. The colony's lights are lit by the same fundamental process that pushed their ancestors from Earth. The technology tree on this new world does not start from scratch. It is grafted from a branch that survived the interstellar dark. For the ships that sailed on light, the transformation is even more poetic. The vast gossamer photon sail, kilometers across, is no longer needed for propulsion. But it is far too valuable to discard. With its perfect mirrored surface, it becomes a foundational piece of orbital infrastructure. Engineers could reconfigure it into a colossal space-based solar power array. It would be positioned in a permanent orbit, catching the unfiltered rays of the new sun and beaming clean, immense power down to the planetary surface or to orbiting habitats. The sail that once harvested momentum from a distant star now harvests energy from a new one, its purpose transformed from travel to sustenance. It becomes a permanent monument in the sky, a silver petal visible from the new world below, a constant reminder of how they arrived. This repurposing turns the propulsion architecture into more than a machine. It becomes the seed crystal of the new civilization. Every circuit, every turbine, every gram of specialized alloy carries within it the story of the voyage. When a technician on the New World maintains a generator that once thrummed inside the interstellar arc, they are touching a living artifact of their own origin. The engine's design principles, the knowledge of magnetic containment or photon dynamics, become the foundational sciences of the new society. Their first engineers are not inventors, but curators and adapters of an ancient, proven technology. This creates a powerful cultural through line. The epic of the long journey is not just a story in a history book, it is embedded in the very infrastructure of their daily lives. The power grid hums with the same rhythm as the engine that brought them. This forges an unbreakable symbolic link, ensuring that the sacrifice and ingenuity of the builders are never forgotten, but are instead built upon, literally and figuratively, by every generation that follows. Therefore, the propulsion system is designed from the very beginning with this dual purpose in mind. The builders must ask not only how will this get us there, but what will this become when we arrive? Can the reactor be modular, so sections can be detached without destroying the whole? Can the sail's material be reconfigured, or its support structure adapted to new loads? This foresight elevates the architecture from a transit vehicle to a heritage asset. It means the greatest machine ever built does not end its life as a derelict hulk in a high orbit, but as a fertile seed pod, bursting with the potential for a new beginning. The engine's final legacy is not silence, but a transformed and enduring voice, powering the first lights of a civilization born from the longest journey any people has ever known. The blueprints for a 10,000-year engine are not enough. We cannot simply build it and hope it lasts, for hope is a fragile thing against the relentless grind of deep time. So before we forge a single gram of hull, we must first build a ghost of the ship, a perfect, living reflection in the realm of pure data. This is the digital twin, an ultra-detailed virtual model of the entire propulsion architecture, a mirror world where we can run the Voyage 1,000 times at 1,000 times the speed to watch how it dies. This simulation is more than a tool. It is a time machine for engineers, allowing us to compress millennia into months of processing time. We feed the model every known variable, the precise metallurgy of the reactor lining, the statistical likelihood of a micrometeoroid impact on the sail, the slow decay of superconducting magnets under constant neutron bombardment. Then we set the clock racing. We watch as virtual years blur into centuries. We observe not for a single failure, but for patterns of decay, for the unexpected interactions between systems that only reveal themselves after 500 years of continuous operation. Does a harmonic vibration in the magnetic containment field, too slight to notice at first, gradually fatigue a critical weld after 2,000 years? Does the slow outgassing of a polymer seal in the fuel lines alter the plasma chemistry over generations, subtly reducing thrust efficiency? The digital twin hunts for these silent, creeping failures, the kind no short-term test could ever uncover. It becomes a virtual proving ground for deep time itself, a place where we battle the demon of entropy by anticipating its every move. Yet a simulation is only as good as the physics and data we give it. To anchor this digital ghost in reality, we must subject the actual materials to their own hellish trials. Here on Earth, in heavily shielded laboratories, we bombard samples of potential hull alloys and reactor components with radiation equivalent to what they would face over 10,000 years in the interstellar medium. We do not just test for a day or a year, we run these experiments for decades, watching how materials become brittle, how insulators darken and crack, how self-healing polymers lose their vitality. We are not testing for strength but for timelessness. We place components in machines that flex them, heat them, and cool them in relentless cycles, simulating not years, but hundreds of thousands of years of thermal stress. This physical torture informs the digital model, making its predictions more accurate, its visions of the future more trustworthy. The most profound challenge, however, may lie in simulating the human element. Can we model the society that will tend this machine? Advanced digital twins attempt to incorporate models of social drift, of how maintenance protocols might be subtly altered or forgotten over generations, of how a culture's relationship with the engine might change from reverent understanding to mythologized fear. We run sociological simulations alongside the engineering ones, asking what happens if the engineer-priest caste loses political influence in the 37th generation, or if a resource shortage forces a society to cannibalize non-critical systems, inadvertently weakening the propulsion architecture's redundancy. These are not games, they are vital stress tests for the entire mission concept. By marrying brutal physical testing with profound digital foresight, we attempt to do the impossible, to see around the corner of time. We are looking for the single point of failure that only appears in the 9900th year, the social shift that undermines the technical safeguards, the compound effect of a million tiny, perfect storms. This process forces a humility upon the designers. They learn that reliability is not a property you add, but a quality you bake into every decision from the very first sketch. Each simulation run, each material test, is a conversation with the future, a question whispered to the digital ghost, will this last? And in its answer, shaped by data and foresight, we find not a guarantee, but our best possible map for navigating the eternal night. A civilization's soul can be found in the rhythm of its machines. For the children of the Ark, born into a metal sky, the steady pulse of the engine is not just a sound, it is the first and last truth of their world. It is the reason they exist, the force that shapes every day, and the legacy that defines their purpose. This is the final, unifying vision, where propulsion transcends engineering to become the cultural keystone of an entire society. The chosen architecture is not a component of the mission. It is the mission's living, beating heart, the central pillar upon which every other aspect of life is constructed. Whether it is the contained stellar fire of a fusion reactor or the silent, patient wing of a photon sail, this system becomes the ultimate source of meaning, weaving itself into the very fabric of their identity. Consider the economy. In a closed world, nothing is wasted and every action has purpose. The propulsion system dictates what that purpose is. On a ship using a mass driver that ejects processed asteroid slag, the entire industrial cycle, from mining to manufacturing, is directly fueled by the need to create reaction mass. A miner is not just extracting resources, they are firing the engine. A factory worker recycling waste metal is contributing to the ship's forward motion. Their labor has a direct, tangible connection to their journey's continuity. On a vessel powered by a laser beam from a distant home, the economy is one of meticulous conservation and perfect efficiency, for they cannot produce more energy, only use what is given. Every watt diverted to a non-essential task is a subtraction from their lifeline, making frugality and precision core cultural virtues. The engine defines what is valuable, what is sacred, and what is simply necessary. This extends seamlessly into social structure. Who holds power in such a society? The answer is often written in the engine room. The individuals who understand, maintain, and control the propulsion architecture become the most vital custodians of survival. They could evolve into a revered priestly class, the engineer priests who interpret the ancient rituals of maintenance and whose word carries the weight of existential law. Their knowledge is not merely technical, it is theological, for they commune with the machine that gives life. Their decisions about thrust allocations or reactor output could determine agricultural yields, water recycling rates, and the very gravity people feel beneath their feet. Social status, political influence, and cultural narratives all flow from this central source of power and mystery. The engine's character seeps into the daily rhythms and the collective mythos. A culture living with the constant, gentle hum of a fusion drive experiences time as a linear arrow, a relentless push toward a future goal. Their stories might be epics of endurance and forward momentum, tales of the builders who forged their artificial sun. Their art could be filled with motifs of contained energy, magnetic fields, and the sacred geometry of the reactor. In stark contrast, a society sailing silently on a light sail, pushed by a beam from a forgotten Earth, lives in a world of profound receptivity. Their mythos is not one of mastery, but of trust and patience. They are the children of the light, riding a gift sent by ancestral gods. Their rituals might involve aligning ceremonial mirrors or observing the precise angles of starlight. Their philosophy centered on grace and borrowed momentum. The engine provides the foundational metaphor through which they understand their place in the cosmos. Ultimately, this machine is the physical manifestation of a 1,000-generation promise. It is the most tangible connection the crew has to the builders, those almost mythical figures who sacrificed the wealth of a solar system to send them on their way. To touch a coolant line or monitor a magnetic field is to touch the hand of an ancestor from 10,000 years past. The engine is their shared inheritance, a trust passed down with the solemn instruction, "Keep this heartbeat going." And in that instruction lies their promise to the future, to the descendants who will one day feel the engine's fire for the last time, not in the void but in the light of a new sun. The propulsion architecture, therefore, is more than steel and plasma. It is the scripture of their journey, the clock of their history, and the altar of their hope. It is the silent, unwavering answer to the only question that matters in the deep night: why are we here? The machine's steady pulse replies to continue. The final lesson is not about velocity, but about time itself. Every propulsion architecture we have explored, from the roaring pulse of an Orion drive to the silent metabolism of a world ship, is ultimately a vessel for a single, staggering idea: the belief that humanity can make a promise longer than history. To design a machine for 10,000 years is to accept that you are not building for a mission, but for a civilization you will never meet. Your blueprints will become their mythology. Your engineering tolerances will become the natural laws of their world. This transforms the very act of creation into an act of profound, selfless faith. It asks us to invest the wealth of a solar system, the focus of generations, into a single artifact whose ultimate purpose is to erase all memory of the need for its own existence by delivering its children to a new home. The fusion torch, with its contained star, offers the covenant of a steady, knowable heartbeat, a rhythm of power and warmth that becomes the central sun of a traveling culture. The light sail, in its patient grace, offers a covenant of trust, a reliance on a beam of light from a homeland that may have long since turned to dust. The biohybrid vision offers a covenant of life, promising a ship that heals and adapts like a forest, its propulsion woven into the very cycle of breath and decay. Each is a different answer to the same eternal question: how do you sustain a story across the dark? These are not engines in any sense we recognize today. They are closed ecological cycles with a vector. They are mobile geology. They are the physical manifestation of a culture's deepest values, cast in titanium and light. Choosing one is not merely selecting a technology. It is choosing the kind of ancestors we wish to be. Will we be the daring ones who compacted the journey, accepting greater risk for the sake of a nearer conclusion for our descendants? Or will we be the patient ones who built for such profound endurance that the journey itself becomes the enduring state of being, a world that simply continues? There is no single right answer, only the weight of the choice. This long gaze across deep time reshapes our understanding of progress. It teaches that the ultimate innovation may not be speed, but reliability. Not power, but longevity. Not the brilliance of a momentary breakthrough, but the stubborn, meticulous care required to make something last 10,000 years without a single catastrophic flaw. It is a lesson in humility for a species often obsessed with the next quarter, the next election, the next generation. It asks us to think in units of centuries, to plan for failures that will only manifest after 50 generations have lived and died. As we look up at the stars, let us carry forward this deeper dream. Let us dream not only of stepping onto alien soil, but of building the hearth that keeps the flame of consciousness alive during the inconceivably long night between suns. Let us become the builders of legacies, the architects of endurance, the ones who planted forests of technology whose shade we will never feel. If this vision of humanity as a multi-generational species speaks to you, consider joining our community. Subscribe to continue exploring the ideas that will shape our cosmic future. And we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which propulsion legacy would you choose to carry the story of humanity forward into the galactic dark?